In addition to interviews and music and supplemental footage that provides context, this video also uses stills from the urban archives and work from an artist incarcerated in Western Pennsylvania. Later in the video, there are photographs from Harvey Finkle. The images work to draw the viewer into the video and into the subject and into the message of the video. They win over the eye and the ear and then the intellect and the emotions. How and where can you find such images? What problems exist with the use of such images? These are questions that I pose to our first panelists. They will hopefully address those issues and others that you might have about the use of stills in visual legal advocacy. Sitting on the first panel are Deborah Boyer, representing phillyhistory.org, a great website. John Pettit of Temple's Urban Archives. You saw stills from the archives in the clip I showed. And Harvey Finkle, the social documentary photographer. One of the reasons I put this panel together was that my students knew Harvey Finkle and I did not. And I wanted to meet him. So we're going to start with Deb.
My name is Deborah Boyer. I serve as the project manager for phillyhistory.org, which you all are about to learn probably more about than you really wanted to know. I'm also a project manager at a software company called Azavia here in Philadelphia. We're actually the company that built Philly History, and we still take care of the project management for the site. And my background is in public history and archives, so I was really excited to kind of spread the gospel of archival photography to the lawyer crew. So hopefully you'll, as we previously heard, see the power of historic images for your use. So, is anybody here familiar with phillyhistory.org? Has anybody been to the site? Okay, I see a couple of hands, great. This is the main homepage, and it's a website that's run by the City of Philadelphia Department of Records. You may or may not be aware that the Department of Records here in Philadelphia is the department that manages the city archives. So if you need birth or death records or deeds or anything like that, that's all the city archives, that's all the Department of Records. They also have a fantastic photograph collection, estimated at easily 2 million images. We can't even count how many there are actually there, but that's our best guess. And a lot of these images were always available to the public, but you had to go to the archives between 9 and 5, you had to show your ID, it was just a big pain, nobody did it. So we wanted to make them available online, and the result in September 2005 was phillyhistory.org. We are officially 5 years old, which is very exciting. The site, as I said, is a project of the Department of Records. It's we started with 90 photos, we're up to over 90,000 historic photographs and maps. At this point, we have 10 collections from 5 different organizations. We're very excited that the project has really grown to embrace more than just the City Archives collections. Over the last few years, we've had the Water Department add photos, the Office of the City Representative, the Library Company of Philadelphia, the Free Library, lots of different images are on there. And so when you're thinking of how can you use visual resources in your advocacy, one of the things to think about is what different collections does an archive have? And at Philly History, we're really blessed to be able to have many different kinds of photographs. The City Archives has a lot of property photos, and we'll talk about how those can be really useful. The Water Department has a lot of infrastructure photos, which sounds monumentally boring at first, thought. They're actually really fascinating and really interesting, and I think could be very useful. Other things are event photos from the city representative. Basically, if a dignitary came to this city from 1950 to 2010, the city representative's office has documented it. Parades, festivals, everything. They are the people there with cameras making sure that it's saved for the future. And then the Library Company and Free Library obviously add amazing historical photographs from the 1800s up until the present. So altogether, we have, like I said, over 90,000 images, which is a great resource that you might think about using in terms of your work, whether to show what something looked like in the past or to form a connection with your audience. At this point, we've been, I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I think we've been pretty well embraced by the public. We have over 5,800 registered users, and we receive about 13,000 unique visitors a month. So we're very proud about that. So how do you use the site? I want to keep this brief because I really want to talk about the photographs, but I don't think it does you much good to say, here they are, but not tell you how to use the site. I think the coolest part of the site, and how my company got involved because we do geographic software, is that you can actually search the photographs based on location. So say you want to find photographs of 12th and Market Street. You enter 12th and Market in the address, and it'll show you all of the photographs of 12th and Market. You can filter them down by date, you can filter them by subject, anything like that. You can search by neighborhood, all sorts of different search options. Why is this important? I think that it could be really useful in your advocacy work because people connect extremely strongly with a location. When you meet somebody for the first time, what's one of the first questions that you ask them? Where are you from? Where do you live? That's how we understand people. That's how we connect with them. We find common bounds based on shared places. And so if you're looking at advocacy work, at a way to connect people together, looking at the location where those people are from can be a really valuable tool. So to find a location, like I said, all you do is search an address, you can pick a neighborhood, you can all do the normal things too, keyword, date, all of that type of thing. We also have what we refer to as Big Map page. It's very technical. And Big Map page really reinforces where the photographs are located. So as I said, this is 12th and Market. And across the bottom, you might have photographs that range from 1860 to 1950. And it really helps to show how places don't just exist at one point in time. I think so often we think of a place and think of it at a certain point. Like when you think of Independence Hall, you think 1776. But it existed for lots of other years, and lots of other events happened in that time. And this kind of shows the continuity of different locations. If you want more information, you simply select a photo and it'll give you a detailed view with all sorts of cool information. This is the Philadelphia Trade School, which was part of an educational movement to really provide people with the practical skills that they needed to be able to get careers. We also are very, very focused on giving opportunities for public interaction. It's designed to encourage user feedback. We have an option where people can submit error reports if they think something that is wrong with the photo. Maybe they disagree with an address or the date. Believe me, people use this. They love this. I have lots of things to look through because of this, and that's great. One of the best features is sometimes they just know what we don't. Maybe we'll have a photograph of a creek. I can't tell you one creek from another creek, but somebody who is from that neighborhood and has been part of restoration projects will do the research, they'll figure it out, and they'll let us know. And that's a really great way to build a community around these photographs, build a community around this history. And again, in terms of thinking of your own work, it's a way that showcases yet again that the public really connects with visual items. They really connect with photographs that show their neighborhoods, their communities, their houses, because it's something that they feel a close tie to, and they're willing, for free, to go and do the work to make sure it's as accurate as possible. People can leave, they can request certain photos to be added, they can leave comments, they can provide feedback, all sorts of different things. They really help spread the word and make this a community project, which is very important to us. So what does that result in? It results in some absolutely beautiful photographs. Anybody want to guess at the location of this one? 12th and Market, yes. The clock is still there. This would be the Hard Rock Cafe over on the left side of the photograph. And this, I think, is just a really fantastic image to show how things have changed and yet how they've stayed the same at the same time. Obviously, we don't have cars like this, and there's a horse-drawn carriage in the background, but we still have that type of public transportation going down Market Street. We still have people clustered there with a newsstand on the corner. And I think that showing that sameness and yet that differentness is a really powerful visual tool. This is one of the water department infrastructure photographs. Like I said, they're kind of fun, actually, and they're really valuable to show how the city has developed and why it's developed in a certain way. Why did we have to put in drains this big? Why did we put all of our creeks and sewers underground? Why doesn't that stuff exist anymore? It raises a lot of questions. That's what photographs do in the best scenario. They raise questions and they help you answer questions. We also have some more humorous photographs. This is the rat receiving station, which certainly raises a lot of questions. It has a companion photo that I don't use, which is literally a table covered with dead rats. Apparently that was worth documenting, so there can be some humorous ones as well. But what I really have said before and what I'll say again is that each of these photographs is intimately tied to a location. And that's one of the most valuable parts, I think, of the website, the fact that you can find photographs that you personally connect to. So this is a pumping station, the Spring Garden pumping station. This is a theater. Who doesn't remember going to a theater or some type of entertainment venue as a child or as a young adult? It's something that we strongly connect to. And so it provides a historical record not just of a time or an event, but of the place. And connecting to that place can be extremely important. We also have some options to really reinforce that connection between past and present. You can view the photographs and then view the same location in Google Street View, so you can see how things have changed and how they remain the same. So I love this one because it has a trolley in the old photo in the exact same location where there's a SEPTA bus coming down the road in the current photo. You can view the photographs in Google Earth. All of these are just tools to really help ground people in the location and show how things have changed and yet how they remain the same. We have a mobile access option so that you can walk down the street, you can see the photographs while you're walking down the street. Okay, so all of this, as I've said, is to really reinforce the idea that place is an important idea in what you're doing in terms of advocacy. And some of this stuff we've mentioned. People connect really strongly to place. So when we're talking about how can visual resources be used in legal work or in legal advocacy, I think one of the best ways is to use photographs of places. If you think about it, places can trigger memories, they can trigger events. I come from a public history background, museum studies background, and one of the best ways when you're trying to conduct oral history interviews is to show somebody a picture of a place that they knew as a child, because it makes them remember. So if you're doing something that requires interviewing, this might be a tool. Show somebody a picture of a place that they remember. Or if you're trying to really reinforce the conditions of something or how something has changed, show a place, because that's something that everybody understands. People have memories of walking down a street and seeing a particular location, a particular building. Places can be both common and contested ground, and that can be really valuable for your work legally. What does it mean when we have one place that multiple people use, different types of people, different groups of people? Do they all use it in the same way? Do they use it in different ways? Do they have contested views, differing views, challenging views of how that space should be used? They also tell many stories and many histories. Anybody want to guess where this photograph is taken at? I love this game. Name that location.
High Street?
No, it's Market Street. Yeah, this is why Market Street was called Market Street. It used to be known as High, but these are the market buildings that were down the middle of Market Street in the mid-1800s. This is actually 6th and Market. So talk about a location that has dramatically changed. It looks nothing like this. Talk about a location that has a contested history, multiple histories, a place where you now have the Welcome Center for Independence National Hall, where there is a building that is being built to talk about the history of enslaved Africans in the area. Talk about a place with a lot of histories. One photo can deal with all of those different discussions. It can spark conversations, it can spark questions, and it can spark a discussion that can be a really valuable tool in terms of the work that you're doing. So here's another, name that location.
City Hall.
City Hall, yes. This is where City Hall was built, before it was built. But the land had to be cleared. Don't think that all of this was necessarily empty. Yes, it was one of Penn's 5 squares, so it did have a lot of open space, but they had to tear down some stuff to build this as well. So think of not just what is there now, but what has been there and what people can remember about what has been there and how that can be a valuable tool in your work. This is a more fun one. You have to be familiar with the kind of Callow Hill area. This is the current site of Prohibition. It's a bar up on 13th. And what I like about this one is that it was the site of a bar in 1894 as well. So talking about how spaces are used, why are they consistently used for the same purpose over literally 100 years, can also be something that can help spark conversation. Sometimes it's a movable location. This is a bus that was used for a polio vaccination campaign. How can something that had to go to people or had to move from location to location, what does that say about the communities that they served? What does it say about the people that were using these services? Why did this bus have to go there? Was that because that neighborhood didn't have its own community health organization, it leads to a lot of questions that you can use in your work to make strong arguments about why things developed the way they did, how they've changed, and how they can advance in the future. Checking my time, okay. Still good? Our goal always is to connect the past to the present, to connect people to our collections. And I think that in some ways the work that you're doing is the same way. We want to connect people to our thesis, to our arguments, to the story that we're trying to tell. So this is something that we are doing now to kind of advance that argument, that connection. We've received a grant to add augmented reality technology to our website, which is really cool. It's the overlaying of digital data on the modern current landscape. So our end goal is if you were having your smartphone, using the camera function to be able to view a historic overlay on top of the landscape that you're looking at via your smartphone. It sounds all sci-fi-y, techy, but it's really cool. We're not sure if we're going to be able to do it, but we're certainly going to try. And the goal is, again, to connect the past to the present, to show how things have changed, to connect people to the story that we're trying to tell. And the main reason people get so excited about those stories is because of the photographs. And I really believe that visual resources can be a powerful tool in telling the stories that you want to tell and changing hearts and making people really see the point of your thesis. Obviously, there's some considerations. We've done through all of the happy photos are yay, yay, great part. Now we get to do to the boring stuff. But there is some things that you really need to consider, especially when using archival photographs. One is the possible context of the photo. I feel that it's extremely important when you're using historical-based photographs to make sure to provide some context. What is the date? When was the photo used? What is the history of it? To get to the second point, is the image unique? Are you using one example to say there's a trend when really there's only one example? Or is the photo honestly showing a trend, showing something that was very prevalent at the time? Don't make photos say what they're not really saying, I guess is what it comes down to. And that's something that you really need to think about when using historical photographs, because people are going to believe what you tell them because they might not have the knowledge, the context that they would have if you were showing present day shots. So it's something to be aware of. Should the image be credited? Absolutely. And I was very excited to see that the photographs in the documentary we saw were very nicely credited. And that's something no matter what organization you're using them from, but especially with historical organizations, it's important to check where the image came from. It might not necessarily be the organization that's showing it. So on phillyhistory.org, we have photos from 5 organizations, so you need to very carefully check where the photograph is coming from. Does the image depict an individual? Obviously, there's ethical concerns about showing photographs of individuals in present day, but what about historic photographs of individuals? Does it matter if that person is deceased? Does it matter if that person's still living? These are all questions that you have to consider when using archival stills. And how are you using that image to tell your story? I think if you look at this photograph here, it's entitled Compulsory Education Newsboy, December 13th, 1906. That's all we know about this photograph. It's a great image. I mean, the expression on the kid's face, the newspapers that he's holding, it's a beautiful image. But you have to do some research to see how can I use this in a way that's true to the story that the photograph is telling and helps my thesis, my point, what I'm trying to tell through my visual representation. So to give you an example of how this all would work all together, this is a photograph of West Philadelphia High School in 1934. It's students and a pretzel vendor, because here in Philadelphia, we love our pretzels. So what can this photo tell you? How can it be useful? In terms of how can it raise questions that we were talking about? If you look at it, it's an integrated school. Was that common in 1934 for West Philadelphia School? Was that rare? What were race relations like in that school? Why were the kids at a pretzel stand? Did they not have lunch served to them, or was this just something that they got after school? What were the educational classes like? What was the community like in that area? This type of photograph can raise all of those questions. It can also connect people to the image. I mean, a lot of people might have gone to West Philadelphia High School. They might live near it. They might be aware of people who did either of those two things. So it's a way to bridge a common bond with your audience. And as we were talking about having to look at context and whether it's unique, in terms of this photograph, you have to do a little bit of investigation before you would use it to make claims in your work, before you would use it to make claims about educational standards or about integrated schooling or about the availability of soft pretzels in Philadelphia in 1934. You need to do a little bit of contextual research so that you can use that photograph in the best way possible to tell your story. So that's what I got. Do we want to do questions now at the end, or at the end? Okay, great. So if you have any questions, keep them in mind. But I guess overall, the thing that I really wanted to emphasize is we at the City Archives don't have some of the amazing social justice photographs that they have at Temple and that Mr. Finkle has, and they're beautiful, fantastic photographs. But another thing to think of in addition to those event-based photographs is to think of place-based photographs. Think of what photos of locations can do for you and do for you in your work. So, and if you have any questions, I'll answer them at the end.
So let me get myself set up here. That was really great. I think Deborah touched on a lot of great points that I was going to actually bring up with our images. And I'm going to do two things: kind of provide a broad overview of urban archives and what we have and how you can utilize the material that we have, and then also kind of drill down and look at three specific images that come out that are, perhaps part of, what I think is Philadelphia's sort of largest, most contested history in the 20th century. So my name's John Pettit, and I'm the assistant archivist at Urban Archives. I've been there for about 6 years now, and I deal with administration of the our photographic holdings, and also our increasing volume of audiovisual material from stations, which I'll get into. I kind of get to think about images in a couple different ways. My background, I never really intended on becoming an archivist. My background at Temple was in urban studies and in film, and I still kind of moonlight as a filmmaker, working with Termite Television Collective and then with Scribe Video Center, which I think probably a lot of people are familiar with and who are always represented here. So I wind up on both sides of the fence, quite often, and it's pretty interesting in having to wear these two different hats, both in and out of work. So Urban Archives, our mission is documenting the social, economic, cultural, and political history of Philadelphia from the mid-19th century to the present. And we do that through a variety of material. This is just a sampling. What you see there are old Sanborn insurance maps, which people love coming in for. Clippings from the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin collection. Right there, that's always my favorite, 2-inch video, an old dinosaur, huge metal reels that have documentaries, oftentimes from public affairs programming, shows like Visions, El Barrio, things like that in the 60s and 70s. And then sort of pamphlets and manuscript collections. We have over 300 manuscript collections. Urban Archives has been collecting it since 1967 and really had a specific focus on, kind of activism, community organizations, smaller nonprofits, and I'm, really proud of the work that my, antecedents had done in collecting some really unique material that I think, nobody else locally sort of had the foresight to do. We have the film and video from KYW3, which is now CBS 3, and WPVI Channel 6, ranging from the late 40s through 2004, and probably through 2007 or 2008 soon. We have a book collection. We have the photographic holdings, which I'll get into with a little bit more detail, and a whole host of just pamphlets and miscellaneous material pertaining to a pretty broad range of subject matter. We are open to the general public, and I'm proud to say that we actually serve the general public quite well. We have probably more than half of the people that come to us are from, anywhere from documentary filmmakers to high school students from Masterman working on National History Day projects, to just people who are coming in just to check out the material, to people from Regina's class and program. And it's really something else, the range of people that we get to see and serve, and as an archivist, a great way to kind of experience this material. I'm a little bit jealous of phillyhistory.org. They're doing all sorts of cool things. They have a lot of fun bells and whistles that we're starting to move into. But we do have a lot of our material online. We have our website, which we need to drag into the 21st century. But it's still helpful in providing a lot of indexes and finding aids to access a lot of these collections. Our digital collections page, which we primarily use now for photographs, but which we've just expanded to, clippings, audiovisual material, and have even started to reach out to people through forums like Facebook and increasingly things like Flickr and Twitter to kind of just serve up our material to people, so we're not just sort of warehousing or siloing our stuff just up in this academic library website. We have about 30,000 or so images up online, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at, considering sort of what our staffing levels have been over the years. But as you'll find out, it is just a drop in the ocean of our total photographic holdings. So it's still best to come by and visit us. So our photographic holdings, like Philly History, we've never felt the need to exploit somebody bad enough to go around and count up everything that we have. So we're just kind of guessing. And we have an estimated 4 million prints and negatives. And they are from a whole range of institutions and organizations. The main stuff being the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin collection, newspaper that was in operation from 1847 to 1982. And that's all arranged by subject and by person. So really, if something was going on in Philly during that time period, chances are the bulletin was out there covering it. We're really fortunate in getting the deed of gift to it, to also getting the copyright. So we are in the fortunate position of being able to grant usage to this material, in a whole range of ways, depending on who comes to us. We have people like the New York Times and HBO coming to us, who we charge for usage, who we charge for acquisition of the images themselves. And then, as I said, we have programs where we provide free images to Masterman students coming in, to people coming in working on their dissertations, or people working on visual legal advocacy projects. We also have the Philadelphia Inquirer. We have all of their negatives. But again, you have to access this stuff all sorts of different ways, whereas the bulletin is by subject and by person. The Inquirer stuff is just by date. So you kind of have to come in and do a little bit of triangulation to figure out, when something was covered, when the photographers were out there shooting it, and then work from there. In addition, we actually have the Philadelphia Special Investigation Commission, which is one of our most widely used collections. That is the body that was appointed to investigate the MOVE conflicts. And we have everything from all of the audiovisual material to clippings to internal documents from the commission itself, to photographs. And it's really, kind of, as I'll talk about, one of the things that people really come to us for a lot. In addition, we have the City Parks Association, organizations like the NAACP, Gray Panthers, organizations who, as I'm sure you're well aware, are dedicated to social justice in the city and doing some, pretty amazing work and documenting things that, otherwise wouldn't be documented in, the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin or the Philadelphia Inquirer. So it complements our material quite well. And then organizations of housing reformers, people who are just going out and doing sort of really progressive photography, kind of hitting the streets and and documenting what's going on, doing work that's, you know, really similar to what Harvey's been doing the past few decades here. And that's all from the turn of the century. They were going out taking pictures of housing conditions in the city in an effort to lobby the city and the public, you know, for better housing conditions. So rather than go through the loads and loads of materials that we could go through, I wanted to kind of look at a sort of little small case study of, you know, 3 images of ours that mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And that I see kind of coming in, you know, coming in and out of urban archives in a variety of different ways. You know, I think altogether we have about 2,000 to 2,500 images actually, you know, scanned or burnt to disk that go out to people. That's not to say that there aren't a whole host of other people who are, you know, just taking our stuff straight from the website and, you know, dealing with the low resolution photos. 2,000 or 2,500 doesn't sound like a lot, but oftentimes there'll be, you know, 2 or 3 images going out to one person, and it's kind of a hard-fought battle, finding our way to those images and reconciling what they're coming in here for with, you know, sort of what we have and what they need to do with the images. In my 6 years, there have been recurring themes that everybody is coming back for. And it's without a shadow of a doubt, there's no close second, excuse me, on what people are coming in here for. And those are kind of some of the hot button issues in the city. The move conflict, as I mentioned, the Mumia AbuJamal, and the Frank Rizzo and Black Panthers kind of relationship and sort of African-American police tension that was going on in the city in the 60s and 70s. So I'm going to kind of just drill down and show 3 images that anyone, that people are coming to us time and time again. I always joke with Brenda that we have our greatest hits. There's 10 images or so that people just come in for. Anyone that's worked in urban archives since the 80s or so can just recite them off the top of their heads. And there's certainly really loaded images that kind of offer quite a bit to think about. So the images that I want to look at pertain to the weekend of violence in Philadelphia, which is in late August of 1970. And this is something that, you know, there's a lot there. This is something where these images were played out in the court of public opinion, and, you know, in 70 and are, you know, sort of worth exploration, and that, you know, have since been used time and time again to all sorts of different ends by all sorts of different users. So there's a power struggle kind of going on with a couple of photographs that really are a testament to the power of images, to the power of persuasiveness, and you know, and that really speak to, you know, how people can use images to sort of speak to how parties can use images to kind of demonstrate who is or isn't in power, or sort of how much control may or may not be going on. In late August, in the weekend of violence, it was there were incidents, a series of incidents in the city that actually where 4 policemen were shot, and one was shot dead. It was born of escalating tension between police and the African American community in the city. Tate at the time had actually declared sort of a limited state of emergency in the Fairmount and Tasker sections because things at the time were kind of really hot. As it turned out, it wasn't in these sections that this stuff kind of boiled over, but instead was in West Philadelphia. On the night of August 29th, African-American militants attempted to bomb a Fairmount Park guardhouse in Cobb's Creek. The bombing failed and led to a shootout in which one officer was wounded and the other was killed. And that's what you see the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin cover here for right now, and that's Sergeant Frank Von Kohn. And so I'm actually going to kind of zoom in on the image a little bit so you could see it a little better, but it's a very loaded image, and it's one that you know, as you'll see, kind of one that could really inflame the public and really speak to the power dynamic in the city. So there he is, slain at desk at Cobb's Creek House, Frank Van Colm, a Fairmount Park sergeant. So the day after the incident, that's the image that was shown on the front page of the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin. It, of course, drew a lot of response from Frank Rizzo, the police commissioner at the time, and the general public. He had called for backup on the phone. The phone was dropped, and he was shot dead. The following day, 2 more policemen were injured in unrelated incidents. The incidents themselves and the photos kind of combined to call sort of law and order in Philadelphia into question. Black Panthers at the time were part of the sort of tension between the city and the police, and there was an upcoming Black Panthers convention that was going to be held a week after this at Temple. So they kind of got drawn into this, given that there were black militants who were responsible for the shooting, although they weren't necessarily related to the Philadelphia Black Panther Party. So, Rizzo and the public started to kind of draw these connections, and this image, kind of shows up on the front page of the paper, and, people are sort of astounded and, trying to make sense of what's going on in the city and how sort of law and order can be restored again. So the following day after the image, after the 2 other incidents, there was another image that ended up on the cover of the Philadelphia Daily News. The police had conducted raids on Black Panther headquarters, and in doing so, brought the Black Panthers out, invited bulletin photographers from the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin and from the Philadelphia Daily News, and stripped the Panthers naked against the wall, and invited them to take photographs to then put up. So, again, it's really speaking to the fact that the police and the public and the news media are all sort of aware of how loaded these images are. That images can speak to who's in charge, who's in power, and this wound up being put on the paper alongside one of the injured officers. So, it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition that you get on the cover of the Daily News. You have one injured officer who's sort of recovering, and then sort of the police kind of, laying down the law here and sort of showing, well, actually, here we are, we're in charge, we're in power. There's a lot that's been made of, whether or not Rizzo was, responsible for the actual, call of, having the police and photographers kind of working together, but, no one's ever been able to totally draw that connection, but Frank Rizzo later on, made comments to the effect of, we're going to do whatever it takes. If we have to bring tanks in, we're going to kind of restore law and order. So, kind of building off of these images here. Just out of curiosity, I mean, how many people have seen this image? Show of hands. Yeah, it's I think it's one of the most powerful images in 20th century Philly history, and one that just kind of really resonates with people. It's something when you mention Black Panthers, when you mention Frank Rizzo, this image comes up time and time again. And again, it's just a striking image in the images being used for kind of power and influence. These 2 images are still very much, come into play. There's this history that they have, and they've come to urban archives, but they're still used time and time and time again. I don't have counts on how many times this has gone out in a variety of different capacities, but people have used it to all sorts of different ends to have this stuff come out. And, as an archivist, it makes you aware of the sort of malleability of these images, about all the different things that you can say on a variety of different levels. The next slide I have is another one of our greatest hits. It's William Cook, also known, as Mumia AbuJamal, in the Philadelphia Black Panthers office. And this is another image that's just out there time and time again. In a testament to the sort of malleability of this stuff, the joke I have is that I always encourage researchers to spay and neuter their Mumia and Move documentaries. It just, as they come in, they just, keep on coming out, as people come in for these images. And I've, sent this out in a variety of different capacities, and most recently, there were 2 documentaries done on Mumia AbuJamal and the conflict that were, from 2 opposing viewpoints. It was Joanna Fernandez and then another filmmaker, Ty Gray Hill, who both were sort of saying different things and kind of lining up different facts about Mumia, about Daniel Faulkner, about the shooting. And we have a limited amount of material on this stuff, and we serve them the same material. And here they were on 2 different sides of the city, 2 different films, saying 2 entirely different things with the same source material, with images. The next image is another one that kind of plays into law and order in the city. This is another classic. How many people have seen this one before? This is an iconic image. In fact, on our Facebook page where we post images, somebody made a request for this image about 2 weeks ago. And it's Frank Rizzo in June of '69, coming from a black tie event, and was leaving to respond to a sort of mini disturbance or sort of riot. And it's an image that's, speaks to 2 different sets of Philadelphians at the time, and really, still to this day, as Rizzo is, one of Philadelphia's contested native sons. And here he is, you could probably see there's a nightstick in his cummerbund. And so there's a lot of Philadelphians that looked at this at the time and thought, oh, this is great. Here's this commissioner, he's off at this black tie event, and he's got his nightstick, he's ready to go, he's, on call to, restore law and order, at a moment's notice. And then there's another set of Philadelphians who would look at this and say, oh my God, we're under some bizarre semi-fascist regime. This man is frightening. What are we going to do? And those types of people still, those 2 parties are still exist to this day. I hear and see from both of them. And again, this is an image that goes out, and people use it in a lot of different ways. People use it in books kind of glorifying Rizzo. People use it in the in the Broad Street Bullies documentary on HBO that was on hockey, to sort of just talk about this sort of rough and tumble sort of Philadelphia of the late 60s and 70s. And, and people use it as an image of how horrifying, police and community relations were at the time. So, it's sort of interesting. There's the Frank von Collin image. It's really widely circulated. It goes out, and it's something that is really interesting and has a lot of issues, given the fact that we're dealing with 20th century and present material. I mean, I've thought about it before. How many times does his family see this image when it goes out, and sort of what does that do? What are the arguments that people make with this image? I mean, a lot of the photos that we have in Urban Archives, I could very well walk right out and sit on a bus next to any one of these people, as well as anyone that's coming in and pulling this stuff. So it's sort of there's a lot to think about as people coming in to get this material and use it. And these are a few images that have been used in a variety of different ways, and there's a lot of ethical considerations. The John who works as a filmmaker and and who is kind of committed to a lot of social justice issues, thinks about this stuff a lot. But in the end, I try not to think about this stuff too much as an archivist. It's it's use of the ethics of the material. I've seen people take our material and do some, really beautiful, poetic, moving things, and I've seen people take our images out and do things that just make me cringe or misappropriate images. And, really, my job as an archivist is kind of serving this stuff up, to organizations, to filmmakers, to students. And if I think about this stuff too much, it's, and I'm not operating with blinders on, it's, it can kind of influence my interactions with helping people, with finding my way to material. And really, that's sort of a violation of the ethics of my profession, which I've committed to providing equitable access to people, despite any sort of issues. Nevertheless, the power of images is not lost on me. As Deborah said, images resonate with everyone, particularly, things of places that people relate to. And, I have never been able to bring anyone into urban archives and not been able to produce an image from a high schooler to a retiree of all races and socioeconomic statuses. I've never been able to not produce an image that in some way doesn't wow people, or doesn't, draw some sort of reaction out of them. There are images that we see that are, okay. And, people come in, use this stuff for all sorts of variety of different reasons, and it's really something else to experience as an archivist, to kind of see this stuff going out, how it's used, and the sort of life that it lives post us. So that's it.
Thank you.
Kensington piece first. I wasn't sure how that time would play out.
I love that photo of Rizzo. That man loved to have his photograph taken.
Who are you? Yeah. That's great. Right, just click down. Push down one on it. Just push down one on it. Yeah, okay. Hi, my name's Harvey Finkle. I'm a documentary still photographer, and I guess I've been photographing in Philadelphia for about over three decades, and in the beginning it was walking streets, taking individual photographs of homeless people, kids, whatever, and it sort of evolved into what I do now is mostly work with groups, different grassroots organizations, I consider myself an advocate. In other words, I don't really get into the discussion about are my photographs objective. They're objective. They're not neutral, is the way I visualize it. And this is one of the grassroots organizations that I've spent a considerable amount of time. I've been photographing this group. It's the Kensington Welfare Rights Organization since 1993, and so some of the issues some of the issues are ethical issues about photographing people. Most of the groups that I photograph, people know who I am. They're familiar with me. I'm sort of part of their organization. I'm sort of in some ways, I look at myself as a lobbyist for, in other words, in the sense, if you look at large organizations, large corporations, they have people they pay to lobby for them. I think I'm one of a genre of visual artists, visual photographers, videographers, one of many who really are like lobbyists for grassroots organizations who can't afford and don't have the money to lay out for, for somebody to represent them. So as I become involved with them, like I say, they know who I am. There's no real issues with them about photographing them. And in a way, a lot of, also what I do in addition to photographing these groups, I provide them with material that they could use for their own websites, publications, and so forth. Like this group, Kensington, they have their own website. And so I'm also a supplier of images for them, okay? And some of what this group does is obviously deals with affordable housing. This is a housing takeover. This is really an empty house which has been unoccupied for over a year, belongs to HUD, and it's usually in the hands of a realtor who's going to resell it or re-rent it. And Kensington was able to grab a list of HUD houses that were unoccupied for over a year, and they went in and took them over, and they live in them. They bring in people who know how to turn the water on, know how to turn electricity on, and get heat. And so, in a sense, they're dealing with what they think is the inappropriate. In other words, there's supposedly 9,000 or 10,000 homeless people walking the streets of Philadelphia, and there's about 27,000 houses that exist that people could live in. So if you have all these publicly owned homes, HUD homes, what are they doing vacant? So the issue here for this organization, well, they shouldn't be vacant, and we're going to find a way to occupy them. This was an image. This was an image from during the Republican National Convention in 2000 in Philadelphia. And the issue here was that Kensington wanted to march from City Hall south to the convention in it was the Spectrum at the time, or one of the facilities that housed the basketball team and hockey teams. And they said, I think originally they might have applied for a permit, and the city denied them the permit, and then they said, well, we really don't need a permit. This is an issue of freedom of speech, and we're going to march down Broad Street. And then the police began to say, if they march, we're going to arrest them. The entire media, national media, became involved in this thing. The leader, Sherry Honkala, was the leader of Kensington Welfare Rights at the time. She appeared on CNN, all the national programs, and they said they're going to march. And the police kept saying they're not going to march. They don't have a permit. There's no way that they're going to go down Broad Street. And Kensington said on Tuesday of the second day of the convention, at 11 o'clock, we're leaving. We're marching down the street. And so people began to get, everybody became interested to see what the outcome of this contest would be. And so thousands began to gather on the south side of City Hall. And first the police came by with a whole barrage of motorcycles, roared up to make a lot of noise and obviously to intimidate. Nobody moved, and then a whole gathering of police on horseback, which is very fearful to many people. Horses are sort of become an intimidating way that police use to intimidate people. And they marched by. So the police did all these kinds of things to stop the march from occurring. And Timoney, the police commissioner, or his assistant continued to say they're not going to march. Well, at 11 o'clock, the first contingent that formed a line to march were women with babies in wheelchairs, in strollers. Right? And the second layer that stepped off the curb were people in wheelchairs. Okay, so you have two major blocks of impediments for the police to get. And the third group, in front of those two groups, were the media there were thousands of media who just formed a wall to photograph them. There was no way the police could stop them from the beginning of the march. So, so they all marched off, and I remember taking some photographs, moving down the street, and seeing the police come. And on Washington Avenue, people know where Washington Avenue, the wide street, there were about 30, 40 school buses there waiting to obviously arrest people and put them in the buses. And the police commissioner was famous for riding on a bicycle, and I was standing there about a block or two from where the marchers were progressing, and they sort of said, and always the Kensington people said, we are nonviolent. There's no way we plan to do anything violent. We are nonviolent, and their history proved that. There's nothing they ever did that was really violent. So it ended up that the civil affairs people who were there to arrest them turned around and said, we're here to protect them. And they marched down Broad Street to the convention center. You know. And this was the photograph when they arrived at convention center. They weren't going to get into the convention center, and they understood that. But this was one of the photographs of sort of what they felt was the victory over, you know, in a sense, the right to freedom of speech. Now, these are some other. This is an organization that always puts itself at the edge. This is really they're always pushing the envelope. They really sort of. It's a wonderful group to photograph because they're fearless. If they go to jail, it doesn't matter. There's no major threat that, oh, we're going to put you in jail. It's like, it's not a big issue. And these are some other photographs of 10 cities that they set up to dramatize the lack of housing in the city of Philadelphia. And again, the fact that there was housing available that's not been put in use. And again, my role, I always feel, is to document the situation that this organization is in. I document a lot of, I feel like I have a lot of homes. In other words, I sort of feel that Kensington is one of my homes. I've spent time photographing the disability rights movement in Philadelphia and elsewhere. Project Home, I spent lots of times photographing for. This is still Kensington. This is one of the homes, takeover homes, and after several months, these two families were about to be evicted from the takeover home that they lived in. And again, the tent city. And what I do, I also provide photographs for the people who are in the photographs. And I think, in a sense, it really provides some value to the people who receive the photographs. In other words, I think they get something from not only being photographed, but there's something about handing them something tangible. This is, again, a march down Broad Street. This was a church takeover when they no longer can find a way to live in takeover houses. In September, the group took over an empty church at 8th and York and set up. People began to bring in mattresses and clothing and food, in the church itself. People began to bring so much food and clothing that the group began to distribute clothing and food to residents in the neighborhood who were poor and didn't have access to this. This is the church. That's, wait a second, we've got a few. This last photograph was, it's a gentleman, the foot you see, the white sneaker, is a gentleman, Galen Tyler, who is a member of Kensington Welfare Rights. And there was a demonstration outside the Constitution Center in which the police, for some reason, took off and began to like assault the demonstrators. This is one of the photographs. And this photograph, along with the video, became evidence in a trial in which the police talked about being assaulted by the demonstrators, and as a result, this photograph and the other video, which showed just the opposite occurred, led to one, the people being found not guilty, and also presenting a lawsuit against the city for the being assaulted. Say where? Let me see here. This is, Regina was mentioning, that showed you the trailer. This is a sort of contract I had with the city. There was a program that was with the city called the Jobs Project. And after 30 years of the city being sued and cited in contempt of court for having, it began with a lot of different issues, but over the last years, the issue was overcrowded prisons. And there's a lawyer from the Penn Schools, University of Pennsylvania, Dave Radofsky, who had this suit for 30 years and finally said to the city, look, why don't you give me some money? I'll set up a program that will try to stop the recidivism rate in the city for people coming back. And they called it the Jobs Project. And they began to work with people in prison 3 or 4 months before they were about to be released. Plus, they worked with them for 3 or 4 or 5 months after they left. And it used to be, I don't know, when somebody was released from the county prison, he was usually given a token and told, here's your bag of clothing, here's the token, we'll see you later. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning. And then the person needed housing, jobs, family, lots of different things. So the jobs program was set up to try to establish some transition from prison to home, to family life, to work, to housing. And so I was hired by the Jobs Project and the city to document prisoners while they were in and after they had left home. So these were some of the photographs. Wait a second. These are some of the programs that went on in the prison. Some of the work programs. They had a computer repair program where prisoners learned how to repair computers, which meant they learned how to use the computers, which was really a great program, I thought. And then they worked, a lot of stuff was just work. I mean, they learned how to do the rudimentary things about carpentry. This is in the women's section of the prison. They made horses for the city that they used to, like, when they have to block off streets and so forth. This is the computer program. Up, we're back here. Up, that was it. That's it. I guess we missed. This is, I also photographed a lot in the peace movement. I won't go through showing all these photographs, but a lot of them have to do with the potential of being arrested, and in some ways it's protective of the people who are doing the demonstrations. In terms like the other photograph with the Kensington Welfare Right, there's some protection, especially with video, that protects issues in terms of being abused in situations like this, because sometimes you get somebody who just is going to take out something on some of the people who demonstrate. Most of these were after the day taken at the federal building after the invasion of Iraq. all the peace groups got together and decided, and let it be known before, that if when the war started, the next day there would be a gathering at the federal building to protest the war itself. So. Is this? Okay, thank you. I'll answer questions later. Thank you.
We're going to have a Q&A, and so you'll be able to ask questions. I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet so we can get the names and email addresses of everybody who's here. Back of you. You can just pose around. Any questions? Yes.
These images for me are a wonderful trip down, memory lane. I've lived 4 blocks from here for more than 40 years. I've been a community activist. I'm sure there are images of me in some of these archives sitting on bulldozers and things like that. But I'd like to ask if the panel could talk a little bit more about the specific ways that these images can be used to get legal results. I enjoyed that Deborah made the comment that the pictures of places and all can help clients and witnesses, remember things. And I was glad to hear Harvey talk about the way in which the images can kind of, correct the record and challenge the police and other version of what may have happened in the event. But kind of, beyond that, what are ways in which, practitioners would use images, not just in court, but in trying to persuade a legislative body or an executive, regulatory body in getting a desired result?
Well, I like the images from the Kensington Welfare Rights Union were shown at the rotunda at the state capitol. One of the things that came from this, I ended up getting a grant, a William Penn Foundation, and we put together a catalog of the activities of Kensington, and 2, an exhibit which traveled, and it appeared. One of the conditions of the grant was that it appear in 5 different locations. So we showed it here at Penn, Swarthmore, St. Joe's, Temple, the Painted Bride, and then it traveled to about 40 different places around the country before it just collapsed. Everything just the frames, but. And the intent of the exhibit was to use it to organize and publicly educate communities. So when they had something at Penn here, they had, in the grant, we had money for 2 docents, for 2 tour guides. And the tour guides were people who were in the photographs, who could talk much more intimately about their conditions, the lack of health, housing, whatever, schools, and so they would talk to the people who would come, and the same at the rotunda at the Capitol. They would talk, and it could be legislators who come by, and then they used the catalog that we produced with it to distribute to different key people who might be able to create legislation that would be helpful. So that's one way I know.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually had in Urban Archives people coming, I can't really speak to what happens past this, but I mean, I've had people request material regarding a certain crime that was committed, in 1979. And, I get their name and email, for the reference request, and it's the same person. I guess, unless it's someone who wants to research someone else with the same name that committed a crime. And, I don't kind of oftentimes see what happens past that, but I mean, there's definitely people that have come in for material, relating particularly to one event, themselves, an event, a moment in time, or a place, or, and then it's similar to, what Harvey was talking about. A lot of people also come in just to set up context. I mean, you can go to our housing reform photos from the Housing Association of Delaware Valley, and you can search it by zip code, similar to, how you traverse the phillyhistory.org material and say, okay, you know, look, this is how bad housing conditions were, you know, on this given block or in this sort of property. There's a wide variety of ways, yeah, ranging from that more abstracted context, or, you know, as I've sort of talked about, I mean, time and time again, people sort of coming to get images of you know, the police force in Philadelphia and, you know, Columbia Avenue riots, and sort of trying to you know, create that context and sort of, you know, bring people closer to that time through either images or moving images. So it really ranges widely, and people are very creative in how they're using this stuff.
I guess we, having mostly place-based photographs that are fairly older, I don't know how, I don't know, I mean, this is my some lawyer knowledge. I don't think you're ever going to enter them as Exhibit A or anything like that, but they could be useful, as I mentioned and as you referenced, for reminding people of, as a trigger, as a way to gather information. I find it somewhat ironic. The photographs were actually taken for legal reasons, even if they might not be so useful as some of the more dramatic photographs. But when they were taken years ago, they were taken as a risk management tool at the request of the city's legal department, because the city wanted to have a record of these properties and a record of public works conditions and construction projects. So that's, I guess, at the time, that was one reason why they were taken, was a very specific legal focus. The city wanted to have a visual record of what things look like. So I guess that's could be a useful tool if you wanted to know what the official record was like back in the 1950s.
Seth Kramer is going to be talking further about using cameras as a way of preserving the rights of people who are on the street, either protesting or otherwise caught up with the law. So we'll learn more about the camera as protector and aid to the protection of rights. We, of course, use visual images outside of the courtroom. We have created little video stories for people who are trying to get pardons and for people who are trying to make immigration claims. So in any informal or quasi-formal proceeding, video can be helpful. Video has been used with regard to capital cases in camera, if not in open court, to support claims of mitigation. And video has been used outside of the court context in support of pleas for clemency and commutation. So there are a number of areas where video comes in really handy. It's very useful at persuading. Advocating on behalf of clients and causes. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Question. I do mitigation videos for sentencing and, you know, people that are facing a lot of time. And one of the big issues for me has always been budget, because I would love to go back and use historical, you know, let's say you've got somebody who's from Puerto Rican descent. I'd love to go back in and show this is their arrival, this is, you know, where they were, this was the low-income housing that they were living in. I just always have these budgetary constraints with the feds. I have like, oh, go make a 20-minute video of $1,800, or go make, you know, something. I just was curious if you guys are aware of either grants for indigent population, people that are in the defender system, because I'm always up against the attorney saying, sure, we want to make it, how we do that, find the money. And sometimes I'm able to rally, you know, different organizations or people who are friends or family of the client. But I had like sort of a two-part question. One is, where do you get money when there's no money? Or when, you know, how do you apply for that through your archives? And then secondly, the video production is so much more expensive. I was just curious if you have people that are doing streaming audio. I've been looking into using stills with streaming audio because I think it can be really powerful multimedia way to be a lot lower budget, sort of using radio and data recorders and stuff like that.
I don't know of any grants or anything through the city, but, you know, city government. So in terms of the pricing for specific photos, we do license the photos on phillyhistory.org, and there's a system online. Any image, you can click the license button to submit a request, and we're very willing to work with you to set a price that is usable.
Yeah, I mean, we really try. The good part about us being such a small shop is, you know, we kind of wind up dealing directly with people who are coming to us. And so we don't have many places will have a specific rights and reproductions person. We don't even have that. We just sort of, have everyone come through. I'm not aware of any specific grants, but I mean, I think, a lot of the times if you just kind of go and, plead your case, as it were, you'll find that people will be, it ranges across institutions, but people can be pretty flexible. We charge $12 per image for a high resolution scan, but people could just as easily take things, that are online, and oftentimes that is enough of a resolution to use. We have kind of a sliding scale for use fees. And so, oftentimes if there are people from city government or anyone from any 501c3 nonprofit, we waive use fees entirely. To charging, if it's HBO, we charge, $250 an image, and hose them. So, so it really ranges. And so, we really try and stay conscious of how people are using this stuff. And there's always a tension. I'm a sucker for access. And when you do that, sometimes you get steamrolled. Someone comes through and they say, oh, we really need this. Oh, this would be great. And, next thing you know, they're requesting 50 scans of images, and my week goes down the tubes. So it's sort of tough, to kind of negotiate that level of access, with the sort of use with things with, our staffing levels. But it's something that you should, approach people directly about. Don't just sort of sit from afar and, say, this won't happen. Be very proactive, and I think a lot of times things will actually work out quite well for you.
I want to ask, how ongoing is this documentation? I mean, we always see the old-timey, like 1950 and 1940, and very nostalgic, but like, what about the last 10? I mean, how ongoing does this exist?
The city still has photographers who document. There's a photography unit, and different departments have individual photographers who still take photographs on a regular basis. A lot of those are, all of them are digital now, so that conversion was made several years ago, but it's not like we hit 1975 and all documentation has stopped. But
What about in different cities around the country? I mean, you must have colleagues or organizations in various, do you know?
I don't know specifics. There are, just like from contextual information, I do believe that a lot of cities still have some photographers. Philadelphia is actually known for being one of the cities that has a official city photographer for the longest. I mean, we've had one dating back to the late 1800s. We had him before anybody else, practically. And so to have that continuity of 125 years is pretty amazing. I know that there are pretty fabulous photograph collections at other municipal archives, but I couldn't speak to whether specific cities have still have photographers. But there are photographers in the city government in Philadelphia.
I have a few suggestions based on the experiences that I've had working with students. We did a project about a state school that was closed 25 years ago, and I just went online and plugged in disability, and I found the Museum of Disability History and the History Museum of Disability. There were two. And you could find images there, and you could use those images directly, or you could put in a request to get permission to use them and get higher quality resolution images. There are a number of public domain sites that you can find. So if you want something on Puerto Rican history, it's possible that there will be something online that will get you to a source of stills. One of the things that our library is now working on, and Merle Slyhoff is sitting in the back there, we're working on a web based page or site that will contain aids for the visual legal advocate, including potential sources of public domain stills. And we hope to have that up soon. I don't know, Merle can tell you further, and you can talk to Merle after it's over, because she might have some other ideas. The other thing I would suggest is that you call the university and speak to the archivist there. Most universities have archives of some kind, and increasingly they've got digital archives. Our digital archive is nowhere near what the urban archive is, so I didn't even bother to invite them. But that's another source of expertise that's not likely to, it's not commercial, and it might be useful. And if the university has the kind of program that Deb obviously excelled in, you were in Chicago, right?
Yeah, Loyola in Chicago.
Is it public history? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called public history. It's basically a combination of a traditional history degree and study in how to interact with the public, either in museums, archives, oral history, things like that.
So that if the university has that kind of program, you may be able to get some sort of help with your project.
Temple actually has a public history program.
I'm in it.
Oh, so I mean, you just have to be resourceful, and as I said, I'm hoping that our revised resources page will be able to give visual legal advocates in general some ideas. In Pennsylvania, it's easy. I mean, we can do Pennsylvania really easily. Anybody else got any questions? We've got a couple. Oh, yes, yes, Merle.
Clarification. I was actually going to ask a question about the rights and restrictions of the photos. I've been on both of your web pages, and here you spoke about students using them. So I just wanted you, but you sort of touched on that. But John, I wanted a clarification of something you said that I may have misinterpreted what you said. During the question, the last answer that you gave, you said something along the lines that people can pay for a high resolution, but if they were content with what was on your computer image, does that mean then that they can just capture them and use them for whatever, directly from the web?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Traditionally, we've had this policy of just sort of, anytime you're going to use our image anywhere, let us know. We have the copyright to the bulletin photos, and it, actually, generates revenue for the university and for us, and pays for a lot of our supplies. So we like people coming through and actually paying for things. As I was putting this stuff together, I realized that I wanted to show that picture of Mumia William Cook, and I was like, oh man, I forgot to take that. And, luckily people illegally use our stuff all the time, sort of. And I just went and Google image searched and found it there. We're still sort of adjusting, our policy. We used to be pretty restrictive, but, it's just a changing environment. I mean, if you put this stuff up online, it's sort of up for grabs, and there's really not a whole lot you can do to prevent people from doing that if you're going to provide that level of access. We have a band at the bottom that says Temple University, Libraries, Urban Archives, because, we like sort of having that provenance where people can kind of go back and, trace where the image is from. People can reuse the stuff. I mean, the stuff that you're going to get online is pretty low resolution, and the party line, according to, our application for use that we provide for people is, run this by us, any kind of use. But, it happens that people the reality is that people just use it. And, and it's also, there's another issue, that sort of comes into play where we have to make a case for ourselves through like statistics and, how many people are using, who's using our stuff and how are they using it. And that kind of helps us, create a portrait of even our collecting policy. Okay, these are the things that, that are really interesting. These are things that have a lot of value. And so, we kind of need people going through us a little bit. But, for any student working on any academic project, they can come and get 10 free high-res images from us, and then past that, it's $1 each, just to, again, prevent us from getting steamrolled. So we just encourage people to come through. We try and stay really flexible, but that's not to say that people won't or, can't use it in other ways as well. So
I tell my students that they shouldn't make anything that we can't show. Don't make anything that we can't show on our website that the client or the cause can't show. And that means that copyright laws must be obeyed. The Urban Archive is easy. We don't use any educational exemption that there might be from copyright law because we want to give our work the broadest possible distribution. That's why we're interested in public domain sites, because buying licenses from commercial vendors of images is just too crazy. It's too hard to keep track of all the limitations, the time limitations. So we don't do that. I encourage the students to shoot their own stills, to get stills from folks that they can meet face to face and come to terms with, like Harvey and some of the folks whose work is shown outside. And in terms of music, by and large, my students compose their own music. And well, we've got lots of talented folks here. You could probably find somebody here who would compose some music for you if you needed music for your advocacy video. So we try to stay within the limits of the law. But the next panel, and Peter's sitting there on the front row just laughing, and the next panel is going to be devoted to copyright. But before we conclude, and we've got a few more minutes, any other questions? Yeah.
My question is a little bit about starting to take these resources and put them all together into something that you can show. I work for a small nonprofit, and I know that we don't, because we're a legal nonprofit, we don't really have the expertise on board to put together necessarily a movie. And I'm wondering, in the city, are there places where we can go on our budget to bring in a student, or are there nonprofits that can help us sort of tell a story like that? This is maybe a strange suggestion, but I would maybe contact the colleges in Philadelphia and the media departments in them. I mean, we're very fortunate to have a very great higher education community in this city, and see if you can work with maybe a professor or even just a student group, and certainly their wages are going to be a lot less than anybody else. So even if you have to just hire one, that might be cheaper. And I know there are some small film production groups in Philadelphia, but I have no idea in terms of the costs.
Yeah, I mean, definitely leveraging academia is really good. I mean, between the public history program that I'm in and then, the film program that I came out of at Temple, there were sort of a lot of partnerships. There were a lot of, a lot of opportunities there. And a school like Temple is really embracing service learning and really, getting, and that's sort of the new trend and something that you've just seen pushed over and over again, where, they want students to go out and really be actively engaged in the community. So you'll get a lot of people from programs like history departments, programs like this program, Visual Legal Advocacy. So you'll get people like that, and then you'll just get a lot of people from organizations. I mean, both of the media organizations that I work for, part-time, Termite TV Collective and Scribe Video Center, are really committed to social justice causes. And if there's sort of a right fit, we'll wind up just sort of linking in. I mean, oftentimes we at these organizations have all the tools and are just kind of looking to link up with stories and looking to link up with different parties. So, so yeah, small, if you don't get people at the organizational level there, because that can often be somewhat complicated, you're going to find people there, or can even put up, you know, ads or something for people who just maybe want to hone their chops, who are committed to a certain cause. And there's ways of doing it, you know, things like digital storytelling, where you combine like an oral history with just photos. You know, it's really easy to do. I mean, now with programs like Audacity and you know, iMovie and things like that, it's you know, if somebody just has a little bit of time, it's really easy to just kind of create something that can be really powerful with no budget at all.
There's a media mobilization
Oh yeah,
project.
they're another great one.
I think they're really a good, accessible organization that would want be. She's right there.
That's Rebecca.
So I would grab her afterwards. But I mean, they teach people how to use the equipment. You know, they have classes on that. They do a lot of work themselves, and they work with they work documenting activities of people who have no resources, and without them would never be seen. So they're really a good one, I thought.
Rebecca has shot for us. She shoots our graduation videos, which Neil edits, so you can find their work on our website. So I can endorse the quality of the work for the Media Mobilizing Project. The Visual Legal Advocacy Seminar does a work for people and organizations, nonprofits, social justice organizations. Matt, who's sitting there, produced the documentary, the segment that I showed, and he's now working for CLS and has done video work for them. But we take on projects from nonprofits. You can also try WYBE. You become a member. They'll provide you with support to produce something. It's probably something you'd want to learn how to do. And iMovie and the kind of support that you would get from Scribe, or the kind of support that you would get from YBE. WHYY has now moved in as a competitor to the other two with its, it used to be called the Learning Lab. I don't know what it's called now.
Yeah.
That which is the brainchild of one of my former students. So there are places where you can get some help, and if all else fails, give me a call, and I'll hook you up with some of our students, because we've got student filmmakers here. I mean, people who have made films, and our law students too, who would be perhaps useful in terms of at least getting the story out and figuring out what it is you need to do, and maybe giving you some help as you learn to do it. I guess it's a good time to break now. We'll probably take 15 minutes and come back at 11:35 when we're going to talk about copyright in earnest. I want you to thank the panel. I thought this was tremendous.